Hello everyone, we're just going to wait for a few more members to get in, then we'll get started. We'll start dead on time, so just a few moments. Already seeing the list start to build up. Perfect. Well, we will have a few more joining us as the presentation begins, but we will get started. Hello everybody and welcome to This Can Happen's webinar for Towards an Age of Hybrid Working, Keeping Wellbeing in Focused. Your hosts today will be Nick and Leon, and I'll be handing it over to them in just a few moments. I just want everybody to know that the meeting is recorded and the slides as well as the recording will be sent to yourself once the presentation is finished. There is no polls for this, but there is a question and a chat box. So if you do have any questions throughout the process, we will be stopping and asking most of them at the end. So feel free to put it in there and I will fill them to both Nick and Leon at the end of the webinar. If you wanted to message either of us directly, you can do that on the chat function as well. Just select the person that you want to send it through to. There will be a feedback link at the end of the webinar. If you wouldn't mind just filling out some feedback about what you thought about it, whether it was good or positive experience, etc. But for now, I will hand you over to Nick and Leon to start the presentation.
Thanks. So hello everybody, and thanks for joining us in this webinar today. So we are going to be talking about hybrid working, how to keep our well-being in focus. So as you're all acutely aware, we're kind of coming out of the extremes of COVID somewhat, but it seems like hybrid working is something that is going to be here to stay. And what we're going to be talking about today really is, if it is here to stay, how can we make sure that we are maintaining kind of our well-being of ourselves, but also for managing people or for company owners, that we're kind of making sure that we're taking a psychological approach to the well-being of ourselves and our teams. So before we get going, we'll do some introductions. So I will start. So I'm the head of psychology at Happens. I also oversee the content development. And by background, I'm a clinical psychologist. So prior to working in Happens, which is coming up 3 years now, I was in the NHS for 10 years, working across everything from high secure to primary care to specialist services, but always with a very keen interest in workplace well-being, and also digital mental health and digital well-being. So it happens I got a chance to, I suppose, draw on my kind of years of experience and skills and extrapolate that to kind of well-being and mental health in the workplace, which is a great opportunity. So I'll pass on to my colleague Leon.
Excellent, thanks very much, Nick. My name's Leon Antonio Altar, and I'm a neuropsychology practitioner at Happens. Like Nick as well, I've been at Happens for almost 3 years now as well. My background, I'm a trainee sports and exercise psychologist and also a PhD researcher, and typically sort of work with people around areas such as weight management, body image and behavioural change. So it really is sort of utilising those skills and that sort of experience and seeing how that translates into the working population as well.
Yeah, thanks, Leon. And we want to keep this quite open. I don't know, I should probably say at the offset that unfortunately Leon and I both tested positive for COVID recently, and we both have varying degree of symptoms, but we wanted to do this because there's so many people signed up and we're really excited about it. So we're probably maybe not at our fully best, but we want this to be very open as well to at least generate discussion. So in the chat function, it'd be great if there is any questions throughout, to please just put them in the chat and we can have a discussion. There will be time, of course, at the end for questions. So yeah, you can leave it till then if you want. So to get started, so I think a key thing is that hybrid working is something, and of course it's in existence prior to COVID, but obviously COVID forced a lot of people to think quite quickly about how to get people working from home and kind of maintain a level of business kind of success with that, but also to maintain the health and well-being of employees through an incredibly difficult time. Now, there is some research that's coming out to say that it's helpful and it's improved productivity. This research, as there would be, kind of counter to that. It's difficult now to say fully because the dust really needs to fully settle before we can really have a clear idea of I suppose how successful hybrid working is. But it looks good from now, and I think once we begin to adjust to it more and set up more kind of structure around it, policies and procedures to best support it, we can really get a good idea of how it's working. So a lot of our presentation today is really talking about how to get the best out of it, because hybrid working, or working fully remotely, can take an adjustment to it, and you need to set up the environment and set things up psychologically in terms of your lifestyle and maintaining a work-life balance, much of which we're going to be talking about today. But of course, they're just thinking about some of the pros and cons. I mean, there is the opportunity for increased well-being, that there's more, because I suppose applying a 9 to 5 to everybody, we're all very diverse, have different lifestyles, have different responsibilities, can mean that it'll work for some people but not for others. So this does mean that there is an opportunity to tailor our lifestyle around us as an individual. Of course, it could be reduced cost for organizations potentially, maybe not initially, but I think that improved work-life balance is a really kind of key aspect of the pros. And some of the cons that can come out, of course, are there is a risk of burnout. Now, we can be kind of on all the time, and there can be a lot of pressure. I'm not going to get into that now, because we're going to talk about it a little bit later. There's the risk of course, presenteeism. And presenteeism, for those of you who don't know, is essentially people turning up to work but maybe not being as mentally or physically well as they could be. So kind of working but maybe not at their best. They might have a mild mental health problems, or maybe struggling with a physical health problem. But then of course another con, which is we're all social animals, and that kind of social connectivity can be lost somewhat. And it depends on what we mean by hybrid, if it's 1 day in the office or 3 days, but it can mean it's more of a challenge to turn to one side and ask somebody a question, or if an email comes through from management you don't understand, you can ask Lisa or Richard, what's that mean? What did you get that? It makes those things a little bit more challenging, because it might mean going onto a Teams call or going onto kind of a Zoom call. Yeah, I think Leon's going to touch on this slide.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you very much, Nick. And yeah, with hybrid working, we are now at the place where we are considering, is this going to be the future? Of course, COVID forced us into a situation where remote working was an essential way for businesses to continue. And although there are various cons that have arose, overall, when we look at the research and the data, it suggests that 93% of the vast majority of individuals would prefer to continue working from home, or preferred working home, sorry, with 47% wanting to continue to do so. So irrespective of some of the risks, such as presenteeism, burnout, and even that loss of social connectivity, people still actually prefer that. And now this is why we have moved more towards these hybrid models, where the remote working aspects that people enjoyed, they're still being kept sort of present, but also bringing individuals into the office as well. And it's sort of this testing phase of that. But we've seen various large organizations sort of apply this model also as well, which is quite telling for what the future may hold. And we put up a sort of a few here, such as Forbes, Spotify, Apple, all applying very different sort of hybrid models. But as Nick was kind of pretty much sort of saying earlier on, even though we know quite a sort of little at the moment in terms of, yes, it can improve well-being, performance also as well can be improved also as well. What are the sort of key considerations which employers and employees need to take in terms of ensuring that well-being is optimized, and also performance also as well? And what are those sort of key competencies that people need to have to work in a hybrid model, and also the practices as well, which really allow cultures to thrive with this new model? And this is what we're going to be sort of looking at a little bit more over the course of this talk.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And before we get into the kind of meat of the presentation, just wanted to kind of leave you with a bit of a question to percolate on over throughout this. And I suppose based on, I imagine many of you will be working remotely from home, and just to think about what do you think works best, when kind of employees choose, where and when they work, whether it's more of a team decision where it's more discussed at team level, kind of what works for both, or is it when the employer just decides that it's, for everybody, it's, 2 days in, 3 days, at home, or, what works better, just to think about it a bit, because I suppose it's still very early days, and a lot of employers, we've been speaking to lots of employers, and, it's, people are still deciding, they're still making decisions that may change, and it's still kind of a moving area. So be very, very interested to hear your experience out there. As I said, if the chat function, anything you want to put through, please do. So we've broken it down. So we've broken it down into kind of 4 pillars that we think, kind of cover a lot of the important aspects of, working remotely. So we're firstly going to touch on, connection and trust. So staying connected to our colleagues, staying connected to managers, excuse me, kind of our environment, kind of things around setting a routine, setting things up that we can kind of be as productive as we can in kind of a remote environment, in the office and at home, and also health and well-being. So kind of mental well-being and physical well-being, which we're going to touch on. Excuse me.
And then the final one, I can continue. Final one is motivation and performance as well. So they're the sort of 4 pillars there that we're going to be sort of exploring.
So, so the first one we're going to be touching on is connection and trust. So this is very much around, as I said, we are social animals. So it's incredibly important that with COVID, obviously very suddenly, we were pushed into, a lot of us, well, if we could work from home, working from home, just remotely, which was a big challenge for lots of people. It was a big challenge for me. I could be quite open that, I quite like being in the office, kind of, working quite closely with my team, and that wasn't obviously possible. Excuse me. So I think that's something that really needs to be considered, making sure that we're able to create that social environment, even if it is synthetically. And a lot of managers can be worried a little bit about a lack of oversight, kind of worrying about productivity, and kind of if somebody's out of sight, that they might not be working. And that's where the trust comes in, about working out ways of checking in on people's kind of outcomes and performance, and working out something that works with kind of a hybrid working setup. Because I think it's not just that we move to hybrid and things stay as they were. It does mean there's an adjustment for everybody, for the company and the policies, for the managers and for the people there. So it does, for the people working at home. So it does take a lot of, it does take an adjustment. And of course, for managers as well, and for other, as an employee, kind of being a role model of that. And, kind of, it will involve, if people are working remotely, there will need to be a bit more kind of check-in, checking in on people. And every employee is different. That's one of the beauties of this. But it means really getting to know our team a bit better. And because we're all diverse individuals, and different people might need a little bit of different support. So it means as a manager, we really need to get to know our team a little bit more, because this has meant that it's not just in the office 9 to 5, you work and you go home. There is a little bit of crossover now, which I think is quite important. And that moves on to recognizing individuality. So we're all very kind of unique. Some people are kind of parents, some people maybe suffering with mental health problems or disability. Some people might have neurodiverse needs. It's really important that we, this is recognized a bit more. And one of the great things, well, one of the very few great things about COVID is that as a clinical psychologist, I saw kind of a lot more discussion about well-being, both in the media, kind of at events like this, in workplaces. And obviously we're a company that offer workplace well-being solutions. from top to bottom in organizations. And I mean, a lot of these conversations I'm having with people, there's a lot of kind of there's a really good level of knowledge and information there already, which certainly wouldn't have been there prior to COVID. So that's quite positive to see. So it's also in terms of the environment and routines. So it's really important to set up our environment in a way that gets the best out of us. And that initially is our physical environment. So making sure we have, kind of a desk, the right amount of monitors, that we're kind of sitting in a way that's going to be good for our posture. So I suppose that it's set up in a good ergonomic way. But it also puts onus on the employers to make sure that not just in the office, but that people have the right equipment to do their job in the best way. And that goes back to individual needs as well, because if I live, say, in a shared house with lots of other people, or I had kind of childcare needs, it's very different to whether I might have kind of my own house with a garden. So I think we need to kind of inquire with people about what they need to make sure that people are set up to work in the best way. Also, things around kind of privacy are very important, because if somebody is in a shared house, they might be on kind of private company calls. So setting people up in a way that that they may be able to kind of with headphones or the right computer software. So I think that's really important, kind of building that strong foundation, that whether we're in the office or whether we're at home, that we're able to perform at our best, but not just that, that we're able to be thinking about well-being, because this is very much about thinking about how we set ourselves up in the best way. So another key thing is structuring our day in terms of setting a routine. So it's very easy, and this happened to me when I first started, that just went straight into it, kind of set up the laptop, and it ends up being lots of back-to-back Teams meetings and things like that. But as I started to get more settled in it, I started to break up my routines. So if I wasn't going into the office, I'd still get up early. I kind of had a routine where I still have it now, but where I do kind of a bit of mindfulness, a bit of exercise, and well, also I've been experimenting with cold showers. But having that routine has really helped me, because whether I'm in the office or whether I'm at home, I keep that in the morning, which is quite good. It's kind of a consistent throughout the week, but then throughout the day, to make sure that taking enough breaks for lunch, try to finish work on time, setting, if it's going out for a walk, kind of during the day, to make sure that these things happen. Because if we don't, it's very easy to just be on all the time, and that can have huge negative impact on our well-being and mental health. And it's also, I got one of these kind of smart watches as well that will tell me to stand and take a mindful minute, which can also help. And on the next slide is just a bit of an idea around, making sure we're breaking up the day that there's good balance. This particular diary has a color code for, kind of health, social, necessary tasks, and hobbies, and things like that. But it means that, and I used to do this with, and I still do it with my clients, that sometimes when they're filling out kind of a snapshot of the week or activity schedule, that they're able to see in color where the gaps might be, where they might need to add in a few more kind of social encounters or things like that. So yeah, Leon.
And cheers for that, Nick. So moving on to the third pillar, so health and well-being. Obviously, we're quite all sort of aware that our physical health and our psychological health are very important, but also they're very much sort of linked. But when we're thinking about it in this particular sort of space, first and foremost is understanding the risks. And when I mention sort of understanding the risks, we're considering of sort of overworking and burnout and sort of work intensification. Because often certain environments, they may encourage that kind of ethos of working hard. Doing more hours will mean better performance and better productivity, but this isn't always the case. And as we sort of see with burnout, it permeates into various different areas of our lives, being our social, physical, and psychological. So just first of all, identifying and really sort of putting an emphasis on those risks and encouraging individuals to not take them is first and foremost what we should be looking at doing. One other parts as well is our ability to manage stress and difficult emotions also as well. And when we consider health behaviors, sleep, eating and physical activity absolutely essential when we're thinking about overall well-being in a hybrid or outside a hybrid model. Because we know from quite a lot of research now that optimal sleep and eating a nutritious diet and moving more and reducing our sedentary behavior is conducive of better psychological health, better cognitive functioning and overall better performance as well. If we could move to the next slide as well, please. So let's first of all look at sort of moving more and eating well. So there's a few strategies which we can do, and Nick actually kind of highlighted one of them a little bit earlier on. Self-monitoring can occur in various different ways, but for the most sort of simple and basic ways, having a mere sort of diary of what I'm eating, so a food diary, for example, if it was relating to food, or if it was physical activity, just monitoring, tracking how much you're moving when you've gone to go exercise. And there obviously are more sophisticated means, such as Nick's watch and tracking apps and habit apps that we can also have as well. And it's about really finding which one works best for yourself, applying that. And as I said, research sort of suggests that when we do track and we do monitor our behavior, we're more likely to adhere and keep that going. And the second one, in environmental analysis, and also this is sort of known as stimulus control. This is about looking at our environment and considering if it is conducive or supportive of the change we're looking to make. So when we are working at home and blending that with working in the office also as well, is our environment helpful for us eating more nutritious food or moving more? And this can simply be done by looking around, looking in the kitchen, in the cupboards. Is non-nutritious foods, so let's say sweets, snacks, crisps, etc., are they more visible? Are they more accessible than nutritious foods such as fruits and veg? Water as well, is water accessible? Is it always with us, or again, is it quite inaccessible? And it's about putting various things in place, so changing that environment to ensure that the environment meets the particular change and behaviours that you're engaging with.
Yeah, that is so important. And I saw that a bit of research there earlier that like the amount of people are walking to their desk is literally a few feet when they're working from home. It's very easy just to forget to physically exercise and to get out there, because if it is that we're just going to our desk, going to our cupboard, snacking, not really moving that much and just staying at your desk, it can be really kind of detrimental to our health. And in the long term, I don't want to sound kind of alarmist, but it can have really, kind of nasty effects in the long term. So that's why the planning aspect of, remote working is so important, that we're setting ourselves up to be the best version of ourselves, to really protect our well-being.
Absolutely, and that was a really key point made there, Nick, about the sedentary behaviour. Unfortunately, one of the many negative things that would have sort of occurred from COVID is the majority of those who were remote working, our sedentary behaviour went out of the roof because we were sitting at desks, we weren't on our commute, so the walk, the drive and walk, they would essentially have been taken out of our life, and we were sort of literally staying at home essentially. And sedentary behavior is very different to physical activity. Sedentary behavior is just as bad as not moving and engaging in, let's say, cardiovascular activity or resistance training. So we have to be very, very conscious of that also as well. And yeah, the self-monitoring and creating that environment, maybe a standing desk, these are all things that we can do to sort of, let's say, attenuate that particular problem.
Yeah. And how have you adjusted, Liam? What kind of things are you doing to keep active?
Yeah, brilliant. A lot of these things here, I monitor my behavior. So I also have a watch like yourself as well, which basically gives me a bit of a buzz, a bit of a prompt, which is the next line
Sure.
there. If I have been sitting down for too long. I also have little sticky notes as well, just sort of reminding me to do various things. If it's engaging mindfulness, if it's to move more, just something that gives me a bit of a nod to ensure that I engage in a particular behaviour. And as you mentioned earlier on, scheduling is absolutely key. So
Yeah.
as you mentioned about scheduling various activities being pleasurable and key work activities, scheduling in our times when we eat, so our breakfast, lunch, dinner, but also times where we're going to move and engage in physical activity is absolutely essential. It keeps that sort of routine going and forms that habit also as well.
Yeah.
And also, carry on.
Sorry, continue on.
Yeah, and also sort of part of that is the reward aspect as well. When we consider developing habits, it is first identifying that behavior, then engaging in a behavior, but then also creating a reward response also as well, which just concretes that particular habit. So in whatever way it is that you would want to reward yourself for doing so, be sure to do so in terms of formulating that habit.
Yeah, that's really important. We're going to be talking a little bit later about motivation as well. So let's move on to the next slide.
Yeah, so sleep, again, another key health behavior as well, which many of us can have troubles with as well. And if we don't get enough sleep, it obviously permeates into all areas of our life. We feel irritable, our performance in meetings and work is not optimal. But there are a variety of things we can do, again, just to ensure that we improve our sleep or give us the best chance of having a good night's sleep. So one of the first ones is really creating a sort of a nice and let's say sleep-friendly environment, which is dark, cool, and quiet at night. Before going to sleep, avoiding caffeine, alcohol, and heavy meals before the onset also as well. And exercising regularly as well. Exercise is important for various things, but it also helps us to sleep better as well. But a caveat with that is to ensure that we exercise at least 2 to 3 hours sort of prior to bed, because it may sort of overactivate us, making sleep quite hard. Another thing in the contemporary world is avoiding lights and electrical devices, our phones, our laptops, our screens. This is even more important in this sort of hybrid world where our laptops are with us. So it's very tempting to be working and doing things on a laptop, maybe even in the bed or wherever we may wish to do so. But it's key to create a bit of a barrier and a boundary with that, putting the phone away at a particular time, locking away the laptop, turning off the TV or not having a TV in the bedroom at all, and really just keeping that room for sleeping solely. And having a sort of pre-sleep ritual as well, a way that allows you to wind down from your day, really. And that can be, again, it's very subjective. It could be mindfulness, it could be writing in a journal, it could be having some chamomile tea, and just keeping our sleep and wake times quite consistent. Is there anything that any of these you apply at all, Nick, to help you sleep?
Yeah, well, this slide, like adjusting to hybrid working myself, I've really tried to think about my kind of nighttime and morning routine. So I have tried to have a digital kind of lockout at about 9 o'clock. And I bought an old school alarm clock as well to wake me, where I can have my phone elsewhere, so that there's not that temptation to wake up and be looking at social media or whatever it might be, because that's not great. That can get our can start getting cortisol going, start getting us stressed. So I think doing something kind of in the morning can quite help. That's quite a bit more kind of more focused on well-being. But I've also tried to get to bed earlier and looked at the kind of environment around, even things like my mattress that I knew I needed to change for quite some time. Because the more and more research into sleep, we're just seeing more and more and more how important it is for living more quality years of life. Now, sometimes it's a badge of honor in work to, I only got 5 hours sleep, or I pulled an all-nighter, or, which, these things can accumulate, and they can really, there's a lot of evidence to show that it can really have an impact and kind of spur on kind of neurodegenerative problems as well. So a really important slide, I think. Absolutely. So the next thing we're going to look at is a little bit around, just stress. And really this is about kind of encouraging everyone to recognize when they're stressed, because hybrid working does mean that this is a big adjustment. Now, even though it seems we're, touch wood, we're through the worst of COVID, a lot of us may still unconsciously not have processed everything. Some of us very consciously may have felt we're quite stressed, but sometimes we might not be recognize it, and there might be subtle signs or changes in how we feel, kind of bodily sensations, how we interact with people. So I suppose this is just, I suppose, generally, but also for when we are kind of working, is to be able to just, and maybe if kind of even looking at this list now yourself and thinking, when I'm stressed, what are some of the first things that I notice? Now, in the top right hand corner, we have more behavioral things. So I'm snappy with other people, am I outbursting? Am I kind of, am I talking, too fast or too slow? Am I, am I starting to withdraw from people? So there are things that we might notice. Below that is more of the kind of, in terms of our thinking. Are we worrying more? Are we looking more into the future and thinking that it's more catastrophic? And then if this thing does come true, will we be less able to cope with it? Or are we looking back to the past, and are we kind of churning over things that have happened? Are we kind of worrying before bed? So is there things that we're starting to notice in terms of our thinking? And then to the left of that is just in terms of in our body, are we getting more headaches? Are we getting more stomach aches, bowel problems, kind of sexual problems, dry mouth? And then above that, just in terms of how we're feeling more irritable, more anxious, we're feeling quite low. So just some of the signs to maybe watch out for. But also, it's important to think about burnout too. The difference, so with stress, so stress is often when, if we think about a little bit of a weighing scales, and it's when the demands in our life, where's my hand? Demands in our life feel like they're outweighing our ability to cope. So our kind of coping resources don't feel like they're able to manage all the demands, and then that's when stress can come. So it often comes when we feel that we're out of control of situations, that there's a lot of uncertainty in the air, and it doesn't feel right, and that can make us quite stressed. So often breaking things down and problem solving and saying, okay, what actually is going on right now, and is there something I can do about it? But often, and on the next slide, there might be things that we can do to manage our emotions and kind of prevent burnout. So burnout is really when we are stressed, but maybe there's so many things going on that we're kind of maybe working, maybe there's a big deal to get through or a big project, but working very long hours. The wellbeing things that Liam and I've been talking about really are just, they're pushed to the side. I'm too busy, I need to just get this done. And often we can feel quite burnt out. So burnt out really feel quite, our thoughts might be, I'm not good enough, I can't do this, failure, it'll be terrible if this goes wrong. We might be feeling very tired all the time. Cognitively, we might not feel as sharp, we might feel that the memory isn't great. So there are indications that we've moved beyond stress to kind of a risk of burnout. And burnout can sometimes be that we get the ball over the line for whatever the big challenge was, and we think, great, but then our immune system just goes, okay, now I need, a respite. And then it could just mean that we start getting sick, there's physical health problems, we just feel absolutely exhausted. And then there's a risk, if we try and get back too quickly, that it can lead to kind of lingering fatigue or, challenges getting back to our normal self. So just go back to that slide for a moment. So recognizing those early warning signs is really, really important. It's particularly related to kind of hybrid working, because there is that change of kind of work and home, and we need to balance that. That's why it's so important to have kind of a bit of a structure to think about this kind of now in a preventative way. So some of the things we can do and kind of have for our toolbox. So we think about it maybe as a kind of a well-being toolbox. So if we are feeling stressed, what are some of the things that we can draw on? to give us a bit of respite and make us feel a bit better. So some of them might be kind of deep breathing techniques. So when we're feeling stressed, and maybe looking through that symptom list, you might recognize this, but so we often breathe up here. So we're kind of sometimes, breathing quite quickly. And that can make us, feel more stressed. And it can make us, we're not really engaging the parasympathetic nervous system. And that comes from deep belly breaths. So even as a rule of course, if you get a reminder during the day to just take some time to breathe, that can be hugely beneficial. It might sound very simple, but it can really help to prevent against kind of stress. But also kind of soothing activities such as, kind of having a bath after work, or mindfulness, for a few minutes during the day. And for those of you who don't know, mindfulness is kind of a form of meditation that is essentially being present in the moment. So whether that's using the breath to anchor you in the moment, or whether it's, kind of listening to something or the sounds around you to ground you in the moment, it's just taking that time to be there non-judgmentally in the moment, just observing whatever comes up. So not running away with thoughts or emotions, just observing what comes up. Journaling can be very helpful as well to help us kind of process kind of our emotions or thoughts. Now, Leon mentioned, before bed, often some people might, write a kind of a gratitude journal, or just write down some of the thoughts they've been having, or, their kind of summary of the day. And there's a lot of kind of strong research behind that can really have a positive impact on our well-being. And then other forms of positive distraction can be very helpful. So it's things going back to exercise, just going for a walk, calling a friend, doing something nice like reading a book or journaling. They can be all very helpful. So as Leon was saying earlier, with a lot of these things, trying to make them habitual and get into the habit of doing them. Now, I know that can be quite difficult because it might be that I used to get the train or the tube into work, and I used to, read my book, or it's difficult sometimes if things are broken up, where you might be getting the tube on a Monday, or sorry, if you're not in London, you might be getting the tube into the train, or driving into work, listening to an audiobook, and then you're at home on the Tuesday. So it means there's a little bit more thought that needs to go into it to build these kind of into habits. But it can kind of certainly be done. So yeah, Leon, I think this is your
Yeah. So the final pillar, which is very important, is sort of performance and motivation. So one thing that we've kind of noticed over the course of COVID, remote working, is yes, performance overall, productivity had improved, but there was also an increase in a thing called languishing. And this was basically where a lot of individuals just felt that they were kind of unmotivated and sort of lacked a sense of sort of drive around wanting to do something, and that kind of lack of purpose also as well. And this is really, really, really likely to continue when we engage in these hybrid models, because we are still adjusting. COVID still is very much around, and it's just us finding and settling into this new way of working. But there are a variety of different things that we can do to sort of try and prevent that. Now, goals are an essential thing. I think many may be aware of SMART goals or have heard them before, but just to refresh those, or tell those who aren't aware, SMART goals relate to goals which are specific, measurable, achievable, relatable, and time-based as well. So it's making sure that any goal which is set isn't just vague and out there, but it basically meets that criteria. And this is particularly important with employer and employee when looking and thinking about workload, or about particular things that need to be done over the month or the quarter or the year. Working in collaboratively together to identify something which both individuals believe and conceive can be doable, which has a clear deadline, and is relevant to the overall company goals also as well. Regular communication, as we mentioned earlier on, in sort of connection and trust. communication is absolutely vital. It's important to have those touch points just to check in how things are getting on with both employee and employer also as well. And building new competencies. When we think about motivation, one of the key things which can hinder our motivation is our ability to actually be able to execute a behavior, so our competency. So when we think about hybrid working and the previous way we were working in the office, it may require a whole set of different competencies which we once didn't actually need to have. And when we think quite simply, it could just be things such as using Zoom, using Teams, or using all these other, let's say, digital means of how we can communicate. Other forms are boards such as Miro boards, where people can go on there and do workshops. And it's looking at the workforce and thinking, does everyone have these particular competencies? And if they don't, how can we examine this and basically upskill everyone to be sure that they have the tools that they need to engaging in their work duties? And also motivation, intrinsic motivation, is really looking for that sort of deeper meaning as to why individuals are coming to work and wanting to work for the particular sort of company. That delving into that greater reason is key in driving that let's say purpose to continue working, especially when times are difficult and challenging, which we faced and may face in the future as well. An organization or prioritization, again, is really key, because our life may change from being hybrid 2 days to 1 day to 3 day in the office. It's about looking at our overall week and organizing it in a way which works best for ourselves, which is flexible but also allows us to get those key tasks in, and ensuring that, as Nick mentioned as well, that we're not allowing the demands to build up. We're sort of organising in a way which is attending to those that need to be done now, and those which can be delegated or dealt with at a later point further along the line, rather than having everything at the forefront. And finally, reflective practice. So this really is just a sort of looking at ourselves sort of internally and thinking about how things have gone. When we've applied all these practices that Nick and I have mentioned over the course of the month, working with our employee, or if you're employee, working with an employee, to consider what things have gone well and what things may not have gone so well, and what we can do in future iterations to ensure that this process of working well and thriving in these new ways of working continues to develop and continues to work best for everyone.
Yeah, that's really important. And just when you mentioned goals there, like I've been reading a lot into goals there recently, and I don't know, recently finished Angela Duckworth's book called Grit, which talks a lot about goals. But that what Leon's talking about there with the intrinsic motivation, it's really important that some of our SMART goals are linked to more kind of higher level goals that are more value based. So for example, if I'm my January goal after Christmas is to go for a run, and I say I'm going to start running every 3 times a week, and I start doing that, and I might start doing it for 2 months, and then I give up because I'm reliant on willpower, which is a kind of a finite resource. But if I think about the why of that, why is that important, and maybe it is that I want to just live a fit and healthy life, that might be that kind of primary driver for it. The SMART goals then might be, I want to kind of run a 5k, and I want to run kind of a 10k. So the things that we can work towards, and we can self-monitor and see how we're doing. But then the more lower level goals are the things I'm talking about, which are the more habitual things you can tick off day to day. So that might be things like to get up in the morning and do kind of a quick run, or to get my 5k in this week, things that you can tick off. But you're kind of setting an environment and an infrastructure for those goals to actually thrive, which makes them much more likely to succeed if you're just setting those SMART goals without thinking more widely about the why and the kind of how in the day-to-day. So that could be really important. But I think a key thing about this is that with the hybrid working, to get the best out of it and not to burn out, thinking carefully about how we set ourselves up and doing a bit of an audit, it's really, really worth doing. So the next bit really is just kind of a bit of an overview of what we've talked about, and then to open it up to you guys for questions. But really what we're talking about is building that trust and keeping that kind of connection together, even if we are kind of working remotely or working kind of in a hybrid way. But there is ways of doing that, but it does take more from us. It does take more of an effort. So if somebody isn't at the water cooler or right beside us or across, you know, the desk, it does take more effort, and we need to think more creatively. Like, you know, what happens, we have, you know, we've kind of a coffee and croissants meetings, you know, where we just get together just to have a chat. We've kind of days where everyone comes into the office and, you know, we have, you know, kind of food and drink and everything to connect people. And that kind of, as managers, we're always thinking about people and checking in if we, you know, making sure we need to check in with people and thinking kind of about all the different brilliantly diverse, you know, individuals we have on our team, that some people might need a little more support than others at different times, and making sure that we're thinking carefully about that and thinking carefully about the environment too, because it's not enough to say, you know, somebody's just working from home. There is now an onus on kind of employers to really think about the setup for people at home, but also for us as employees to be thinking carefully about our setup and what we need and what we might want to ask for. Because different people are different, and different people might have more specific needs. And I think being open about that, because if we're working from home, there might be things that we do need to get the best out of ourselves, and to really be thinking about our well-being. Because I like the analogy that I often use of, you know, apply your own oxygen mask first, and kind of thinking carefully about our own well-being first. Because I think often we're very human beings that think, you know, thinking about other people, you know, our children or, you know, kind of our friends, and we can be quite harsh on ourselves. But it is important that we do think about kind of our well-being, and hopefully some of these tips can be quite useful in that respect. And I mean, setting boundaries too is really important, because, and I'm certainly guilty of this, where you can end, you know, because I mean, you know, I've got my, you know, kind of my Teams on my phone and it's easy to forget to turn these things off and to, you know, to just go off into the evening. So it is important to set boundaries and to, you know, kind of have a clear work-life balance, because that, if we feel we're on all the time, there's always a little bit of stress around us and we're not really able to fully unwind. So it is important that we think, what do I need as an individual? And then of course the physical and mental health that we talked about. So that's making sure we're moving, making sure we're eating well, making sure that we're eating healthy snacks regularly and drinking plenty of water, that we're watching out for mental clutter or kind of unhelpful emotions, and we're able to kind of intervene early, think, what do we need in these areas? And then finally, as we've just said, to make sure we're, you know, setting goals ourselves, setting goals with our managers, that we're just being quite, you know, clear on where we want to get. And I think kind of adjusting when necessary as well, because this is all very new for all of us, really. This is we're talking about this as it's early days. We're still experimenting with what works. I think there will be more adjustment, and I think when we adjust, we might need to readjust our goals, readjust our setup, you know. So that can be difficult, but that's something that's really important as well. So I hope that's been kind of useful and gives you a bit of a kind of a whistle-stop tour about some of the key things to think about when in regards to well-being and kind of working in a hybrid way. So if you have any questions, I think we've still got kind of a bit of time for questions, and I think it's through the chat function. I'm not sure if they can be asked over video. I don't think so. So if there is any questions, yeah, please let us know.
Yeah, so there has been a couple come through on the chat. The first one is, what are some of the practical steps and initiatives that we can implement with our teams to eat better and practice mindfulness? Because this often gets ignored with us.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, it's so I think it depends. There's lots of different things you can do. I think it depends really on, as well, on the size of the company or the organization in terms of resources. So what we did initially, we had kind of a regular mindfulness sessions that we set up that kind of Leon and I ran in our team, where we'd invite people to join us in the morning. So before work started, we'd have, this is pre-COVID, and we did do it during COVID as well. We still do it now, but it's you know, just kind of set up internally. And we also kind of encouraged healthy eating. So we had kind of a healthy eating snack area that was open to the whole team. We moved office recently, so I say these are things that we're gradually moving back into the office, going to do again. But encouraging people to kind of eat healthy, and it was kind of exercise regimes and kind of gym memberships that we used to go to. Very encourage people to be able to. Leon, you speak of this because you're great at breaking up your day and kind of getting the gym in. So that was one of the things we kind of did. But there's also like, obviously there's lots of well-being apps. So obviously we provide kind of well-being support in a digital sense that offers mindfulness, nutrition kind of tips, webinars, kind of exercise, yoga, things that can encourage people's well-being. But that might not be kind of relevant for every there that are doing a lot more in kind of preventative mental health area. But I think there's something as well about kind of leading by example and doing things. I think it's anything that's done, it's really helpful if there's a champion, kind of a senior you can get in management. I think when we work with companies, we're very keen that there's some kind of a champion at kind of very senior level that really understands the importance of kind of preventative techniques and reactive, of course, but that there's kind of to create kind of a psychologically safe culture where people feel that they can be themselves, and actually the kind of the management of the organization really understand mental health and well-being and want to do something for us. And everyone's an individual, so mindfulness might work for me, but somebody else, getting out for a run at lunchtime or having the opportunity to do that might work. Or, so there are certain things to think about. I don't know, Leon, if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. No, all very good points there. I think another one I'd add specifically for nutrition as well as having increasing the accessibility of nutritious food and having days and slots where I say colleagues bring in particular food or sort of spreads made. I mean, in sort of educating individuals about nutritional science in the most simplest form. So what is a nutritious and healthy diet is absolutely essential as well, so they can apply it outside of the work environment. So definitely having those slots, I think if employees can do that to provide nutritious food, but also sort of awareness of why it's beneficial, but also what particular foods make up that balanced diet. And the same goes for physical activity as well, and mindfulness. Why is it beneficial? What is the science behind it? Really rendered down, and then the actual engaging in that particular behavior.
Yeah, that can really help with motivation, because I've done mindfulness with people that really weren't interested at the beginning, but once they understood it, in prisons and high secure hospitals, or with people with very strong emotions, that once they really understood it and found their way of doing it, because a lot of people think that mindfulness might be kind of sitting on a cushion, kind of doing breathing techniques. There's lots of ways that people can engage in mindfulness. It isn't necessarily, it could be mindfulness eating, there could be mindfulness walking, there could be mindfulness listening. So it's not always just very kind of what people might traditionally think of, kind of sitting, kind of doing breathing techniques.
Lovely. And so for young people that are living in studio accommodation, and working from home, how do you separate the sleeping and the working and avoid lying on the bed to work?
So yeah, I mean, it can be quite difficult if the environment isn't best suited. I think with the sleeping, as best you can, it is so if, say, for example, somebody has to work in a bedroom, which many people will have to, of course. I was working in my bedroom for long periods as well. what I would try to do is to try and to have that divide between kind of the bedroom and the workspace as best I could. So I tried to set it up in a way where there was one part of the room that was very much the kind of the office space, and then the rest of it was very much just kept for sleeping. So to avoid kind of working in the bed, or to very much kind of open it up, have all the the curtains open, kind of while I was working in there, and then to turn it very much into the bedroom, because I think mentally your mind can unconsciously associate that room with sleep, and if it starts to associate it with two things at once, it can be confusing. It can be quite difficult to sleep. So I think try and kind of create a bit of a bit of a divide between the two as much as possible. And if there is other rooms or areas where some people might choose to put, if there is options, I'd probably suggest that it could be useful to do it maybe outside the bedroom if there is that option. But it can be difficult. I mean, if there's particularly, I've lived in shared accommodation for years, and that wouldn't have been possible. I have lots of colleagues who that they work in the bedroom. So I suppose it's just as best as you can try to create that kind of a differentiation between the sleeping aspect of it and the working aspect. I don't know, Liam, if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, no, I pretty much echo what you say. It's that creating, may not have the boundaries of a wall or a different room, but it's creating them in the room. And it could be as simple as, if you've got a laptop, putting that away and out of sight once you've finished it. So it is that kind of work is finished, and now this is the bedroom. So anything you can do really to create those boundaries is sort of internally, try to do so as much as possible.
Yeah, like I'm talking about this to somebody else actually, and they went to get a desk where it could be folded up after work. It's kind of, you pull it down and fold it up. And again, as Leanne's saying, it just, because it can be difficult if you wake up in the night and see your laptop. Oh God, where So I suppose if it's if it's possible to just, once work is finished, then it becomes the bedroom, and work is finished, then you're creating that kind of mental and physical kind of space between the two, and that boundary.
Perfect, thank you very much. So somebody has a young family and they find it very difficult to set a routine. Do you have any advice or tips for this briefly?
Well, I mean, routines could be difficult to set. I think spending a good bit of time thinking about it, and thinking about thinking about what you're trying to achieve with the routine, and being quite structured with it. And I think really taking a good snapshot of how things are like now, and how you want things to improve. Because we go back to adjust as well. So any routine can take a bit of time and adjustment. So it might need tweaking. So I think, think about what you want, kind of set up the routine you'd like. And I think it's a lot about sticking to it and being disciplined, because it can be quite difficult, particularly when setting a new routine, to kind of stick to it. So if there is any kind of books or advice that or websites, I can't think of any offhand, to kind of to support you in kind of setting it up. But I don't know, Leon, if you have any other thoughts.
Yeah, I'd pretty much say that taking that snapshot, and it could be as simple as just getting up a sort of a planner, an activity planner, something that looks at your overall week and the days that it comprises of, and those key different tasks that need to be done, and then just thinking about, what is it that you want to put in there? What does this routine need to look like? And just assessing it after a week, seeing where particular areas aren't working and ones are.
And even the color coding that I mentioned, because I don't have it now it's on my phone, but I did have a kind of a planner with a routine, and I color coded it for kind of the diet stuff, the social stuff, the work stuff, so that I could kind of see that there was a good balance. Because particularly for work, it can sometimes end up being very work oriented. So I wanted to make sure, and I suppose the hybrid working for me, I'm lucky enough to be able to hybrid work, but it means that I can, if needs be, get up and go for a bit of a walk to get some fresh air and kind of fit in with the routine. So I think that's a bit of something to think about as well.
That's brilliant. So the last one before we finish up today, what would be your key takeaway from this webinar, and also what do you personally do to avoid burnout?
Sure. What would my key takeaway? point for people. Well, I mean, I think the key thing that I would suggest to do is, with the pillars that we've talked about, really think about kind of personalizing it, really thinking about how it applies to you. Because I think one of the real benefits of flexible working is we're all very diverse, and it wasn't a fair way of doing it that it was just this is the way it is for everybody. I think it's not a balanced way, and there's a lot of it can lead to a lot of discrimination against particular people that might not be able to work in that way. So I think that's a key takeaway. I mean, to really think about what you need for your well-being, and to try and set it up, and try to set up a bit of a system. So think about the why, what's important to you, what are some of your goals around kind of well-being or kind of hybrid working, and day to day, what can you do? So what are the things you can take off? So personally for me, for burnout, so that routine that I started in the morning, that's been hit and miss. It hasn't just been I just started it up and it worked perfectly. It had, Liam, as I've been telling him about it obviously, but it has been trial and error. But I found that having that has really helped with kind of managing stress, because it is that consistency, it's that protected me time. Now, the book that I actually got it from was a book called The 5 a.m. Club, which talks about the importance of having kind of a routine and protected time in the morning. Now, I don't get up at 5 a.m., but some of the key tenets from that book I did try to apply. So that's what really helps with me. And I think having that balance, I talked about the color coding, but making sure I'm obviously Irish, I live in London, but staying in contact with family and friends, that I'm getting enough exercise, that I'm doing kind of I like doing kind of mindfulness, that there's a good balance. I think that's really key, and that does help with my stress. And then if there is, if I do feel stressed, because I used to be terrible, I don't get stressed, this type of attitude, which is I know now is not a certain recipe to move towards burnout. So now if I'm stressed, I'm stressed, where do I notice it? Well, I notice that my shoulders will get quite tense. So I'll know I need to take a bit of a break, or I maybe need to book some annual leave. Just getting to know myself a bit more and watching out for those kind of unhelpful thoughts, like, you shouldn't be stressed, you just get on with it. They're not helpful. There's more flexible thoughts than that are more helpful. So watch out for those unhelpful thoughts as well. I think it's really important. Leon, I don't know if for yourself.
Yeah, no, I think you captured the takeaways pretty well. I couldn't sort of agree more with that. It's really sort of tailoring it to yourself. Obviously, there's a variety of different bits of advice and tips, but it is knowing yourself, applying things that work best for yourself, and continuing to use those. In terms of burnout for myself, I think what sort of prevents it for myself is regular physical activity for me, is ensuring that I always will engage in some form, being walking, run, going to the gym, whatever it is, just keeping my body moving. And also as well, ensuring that at least once or a few times a week, engaging in something that I find enjoyable and pleasurable to a degree as well. So it isn't all just work and pursuing particular goals, but just fun and enjoyment on occasions as well.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Leon and Nick. That's been a brilliant presentation. Thank you, everybody, for your questions and your engagement. Just a reminder that we will be sending the slides and the recording after the webinar. I did notice a few people messaging the Q&A box just to check that information, but that will definitely be shared with you. There will also be a feedback link that will come up on your screen when I close the webinar. But thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for showing us the presentation today, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Excellent.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.